this is what we're constantly doing, right? We're constantly redirecting the listener's attention to exactly where we want it. And the more we can playfully move that around, aggressively using our tools, the more effective the production is, the more impact it's likely to have on the listener. Coffee is life. You're at the House of Kush. Welcome to Kush After Hours. My name's Gregory Scott. Tonight, a bit of a recap episode, looking back over shows in the past and realizing that the topic of mixing aggressively has been a continuous thread through many of the shows, and I've talked about various elements of what that looks like to me. But I don't know that I've ever tied it all together or even really specifically addressed what is mixing aggressively, because it's a bit of an umbrella term and has implications. Let's get into that. Got my trusty Remarkable here. Mixing aggressively. Mixing aggressively to me, first of all, is, as usual, surprise, surprise, it's a mindset. Now, I want to be clear. When I say aggressive here, I don't mean necessarily like in your face. It's not about the energy being aggressive. It's about the approach. It's about the way that we think about and execute moves. Starting off at the top level for me of the hallmark of mixing aggressively would be automation. The use of automation, the aggressive use of automation. So if you were to hit A in Logic on one of my sessions, that's the view that reveals all of the automation in each individual lane, you would see points and lines everywhere. Up and down here, sections moving up and down, ramps moving up, ramps moving down. Lots and lots and lots of automation moving in lots of directions simultaneously, oppositionally, harmoniously. So I don't know what you see when you take an overview. If you take an overview, maybe you should open up one of your sessions, be like, how's my state of the state with mixing? Look at your automation. Do you see somebody who's crafted a lot of envelopes in the volume? That's the most basic form, where you just the faders going up, the faders going down. In old school mixing, ride the faders with fingers, touching. You got a control surface, you do the same thing. I've never been able to make that work, and I actually learned by drawing automation in by hand. So clicking on points with the mouse, riding an envelope up or down, and enough practice of that, and I know now. I'm listening to a part happening, and I'm like, okay, I can hear that this acoustic guitar wants to swell up a little bit before the transition, so it ramps up. Maybe it wants to ramp up a lot, and then it wants to hit that one, and then a couple of things might happen. Maybe I want to very slowly settle it back down in, so that it's just like, it starts off where the ear is cued. I hear this thing, and then you can really pull the part back. You can bring it down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dB, wherever it settles in, to the point where you kind of get it out of the way. It's still doing its job. People know it's there because the brain was cued at the beginning of the section. Get that settled in. Maybe that's what happens. Just as often for me, what happens is I'm ramping something up before a transition, and then because the vocal will hit, maybe on the one or the one end, wherever the vocal hits, I got to get that thing out of the way. I got to get most of the things out of the way of that vocal. So you'll see a lot of times I'll have automation building up to a climax, and then when the vocal comes in on a given part or section, suddenly stuff is coming down, and it's coming down pretty quickly. And maybe it's like a straight drop down. And if you have 3 sounds that are competing with a vocal, and you pull them all down by like 1 dB, that's a 3 dB drop in competing energy against the vocal. That's huge. It makes a lot of space. And if you do it quick enough and at the right moment in time, the ear doesn't notice that, because hopefully you're pushing the vocal a little bit, because you'll see that. The instruments will drop, and when that vocal comes in, it's up here on the automation lane, the volume, and then it settles in pretty quickly, sometimes over the course of the first word or two, sometimes over the course of the first phrase, whatever feels best. I want to be able to get the brain to switch over here, because this is what we're constantly doing, right? We're constantly redirecting the listener's attention to exactly where we want it. And the more we can playfully move that around, aggressively using our tools, the more effective the production is, the more impact it's likely to have on the listener. And automation. Use it a lot, and use a lot of it. Effects. Your effects, man, if you look at your session, typical session for you, and you're seeing that your sends are parked, and you got a vocal, and you've got to send into a delay, and it just sits there. And then maybe you've got it also sending into a reverb or whatever, and it sits there. And then same thing with the guitar down here. You got this guitar going into it, and it just sits there. And then when you look at the effect itself, maybe it's on a send bus, and you've got the return, so you've got the fader down there, and that just sits there. Something right in Mixville. These things ought to be moving around. At various times, you want to be changing the level going into the send of an effect. If it's a vocal reverb, for example, maybe there's certain sections, choruses for instance, where you want the vocal just wetter. And so you just drive the level of the send up into, or you drive the return, the fader on that channel of the reverb. You just push that goes up, that automates up. I don't know what else is going into that thing. That brings up all of the reverb. So anything going into that reverb will come up. Maybe that's what you want too. Because mixing aggressively, you want your spaces to change. Let me correct myself there. Mixing aggressively, you want to look for opportunities to make the space change. When I say space, I mean this sense of the mix. And so spatially, left to right. If you have, I don't know, let's say 2 guitars, and they're living here on the verses. Or actually, you know what? More commonly, they're living here. People have got things hard panned out in their verses. And then the chorus hits, and you got kind of the same sound, and they're still hard left and right. Okay, maybe that's great. Maybe that's what the song wants. I don't know. But I do know that perhaps there's a missed opportunity there for a state change, for a change in the shape of the space of the song. When it goes from the verse, maybe the verse guitar should be pulled in tighter. It doesn't have to be a lot. If you want that ultra-wide kind of LCR, left, center, right effect, you want the width all the time, that's great. Maybe take them from, if they're 100 and 100, bring them into like 90 or 85 or 80. Like just, what's the most you can pull them in and not collapse them in a way that you don't want? They still sound separate and wide. But then you still have room to go somewhere in the chorus and pull this out. So changing the panning of elements that are constant across sections, or even if elements aren't constant across sections. Say you have 2 instruments playing in your verse, and then you have 2 different instruments. We like that approach. 2 different instruments in the chorus. Those should also probably, if you pan them out spatially, wider in the chorus, or vice versa, right? I don't want to be dogmatic here about choruses need to be big and wide. It can be just as fun and exciting to bring a chorus in. I'm working on a song right now where we're doing that. The verse is really spread. It's very diffuse. I'm playing the ride cymbal in a jazzy pattern, and I've got my instruments very far out, and there's these big, long delays and reverbs and delays into reverbs happening. So there's a lot of like sort of trippy psychedelia happening in this verse, and it's all washing left and right and front to back. It's just big and wet. And then the chorus hits, and all those effects go off the vocals. The vocals get bone dry. The instruments get bone dry. I switch from the ride cymbal to the hi-hat, and the chorus just gets this claustrophobic vibe. And it has this effect of like you don't even mean to, and you just kind of lean into the speakers a little bit because you're like, you could feel that everything got closer to you. And so my reaction to that viscerally is I kind of want to get closer to it, even if it's just emotionally. I feel that. Automate this stuff. It doesn't have to be automated. It could just be parked, right? If you've got 2 sounds, park your pans here, and then when you change sections in the song, different sounds have different pan positions. That's fine. Or you can automate them. You can automate things across the section too. things can start off here and then slowly get wider. Maybe the second half of the verse, those guitars just start to open up a little bit, or they open up instantly, just go from here to here, and that just changes. The ear's like, something just happened. I don't know what. Something just happened. That's a great thing to do to the listener, right? If you got nothing else going on, but you're like, something needs to happen here, just kind of move things around a little bit. We'll feel that, even if it's not an obvious, 2 more instruments have come in. Opportunities. So what do I got here? I got effects are animated, sends are pushed, changing. The levels themselves of the effects are dynamic, right? So your reverb returns, your delay returns. Those are dynamic, varying the width, different effects in different sections. So yeah, that's great too, right? Like maybe you want a wet verse and a wet chorus, but have a different kind of wetness going on in each one. Maybe one is more delay based, and so there's a kind of a clarity to it and a rhythmic element to it. And then the other section is more reverb based, where it's just more of a diffuse spread, and you get that sense of like being in another universe kind of thing. It's a great way to play it. Mixing aggressively, let's see. Height changes. Height, right? Everybody talks about width. Everybody talks about depth. Nobody's talking about height. Height, really, for me, very simply put, is you got bass down on the floor, and you got treble up on the ceiling, and you got your mid-range in the middle. And so you can take any sound. Bass is a great example. You got your bass plugging along in the verse. You know, I'm talking about verses and choruses here. Use these terms interchangeably with anything else, however you're writing music. Even if you're writing like 7-minute long drones, this stuff still applies. So just bear with me in my pop mindset. Verse, chorus, bass is playing. And maybe the bass player kind of has a sense of how to arrange a song with his parts. And he's playing a little higher on the neck in the verse, and then he goes down for the chorus, and it's nice and deep. And that's great when that's taken care of for you. But a lot of times, that's not how the music is written or arranged, and you have an opportunity there with something as simple as a high-pass filter to just like make the bass a little skinnier in one section, and then when you need things to be weightier, you just drop the frequency on that high-pass filter down. Maybe you got it set at 60 and then it drops down to 40. Maybe you got it set at 40 and then it drops down to 20. I don't know, right? But the point is it moves, and it moves in a way that we feel this section of the song extending down. And you want to be careful with something like that, because more deep bass weighs things down. So that's not necessarily what you want in a chorus. Got to be careful with that. But maybe it is what you want. But maybe the bass gets skinnier in the chorus because the chorus wants more drive and it wants to get more aggressive. It's great. Go that way. Same thing with brightness, right? You could automate an EQ and just lift a shelf on your overheads by a half a dB. That's all she would need. Changing from section to section, especially if the player is going from hi-hat to ride cymbal, the ride will give you a little bit of a lift, maybe, depending on how it was played and how it was mic'd and everything. But the snare drum will get brighter, the kick drum will get brighter, the room will get, everything will get brighter if you lift a high shelf on it. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe instead, that's the time to bring in percussive elements that have more high frequencies. Shakers, tambourines. If they're already in, shove them. Make them louder. Make them wider. Add a little bit of reverb to them. Slap echo is a great way to make things brighter. Add a little bit of slap to something. Short, fast, single tap delay. That's what a slap. All right, anyway. Last thing I got here on mixing aggressively is changing identical sections. Now, some of this can be done, ideally, much of this is done in the writing and arranging phase, but even if all you have is a fixed session, and say the artist has a chorus happening twice in a song, and let's just say said artist, didn't really change much of anything in this chorus to this chorus, you probably want to introduce some changes from one section to the next. Sometimes that's a difficult conversation with the artist where you're like, I think we should mute out one of these guitars in the first chorus so that the second chorus has the second guitar come in. We have a little bit of variety here. The section feels more interesting and more dynamic compared to the first. It's just different, right? Sometimes Just different is all you need to make things more interesting and to maintain interest across the length of a song. You know, songs can be long. When nothing's changing, they can be very long. So you can, in the arrangement space, add more harmonies to your chorus, or you can change the harmonies, have different harmonies. And again, if there's harmonies in this one and in this one, and they don't change, consider muting something out. Or get back to your effects and be like, all right, well, I got to play up some effects in this one, so it's not just about making the first chorus wet compared to the first verse being dry. Now it's about making the second chorus even wetter than the first, or drier, or brighter, or more distorted. Mix things differently from section to section. Identical sections, mix them differently. So if you're applying this mindset all through the mix, you're really working on changing the spaces and the effects and the width and the depth of things section by section by section, and then also from section to identical section, making sure that those are different from each other so that we're not hearing the same thing that we heard 2 minutes ago. And, well, that was interesting then, but now it's a little boring, you know? Playing with this stuff. I've reached the end of my list. Mixing aggressively. It's not just for breakfast anymore. Kush After Hours, Gregory Scott. I hope this in some way inspired you. Get in there. Draw more lines. Make more things move. Make more things change. Make more things different. Different is enough.